Look at these brilliant moves by Alireza Firouzja, the Iranian-born who neutralized to a Frenchman recently and, according to many, a potential world champion at some point. Rook to h5 check. If you take, he will also play in the candidates this year. Look at these brilliant moves from him. Here he plays queen takes f1. If you take the queen, then there's two ways to checkmate. Well, you take the pawn and see how weak the king is. If you move aside the king, then the other bishop comes in. Look at these two bishops. We have a video on winning with the bishop pair. Check it out. But if you put in between the bishop, there is an even more beautiful checkmate with rook to f1 and the bishop is pinned. So this is a checkmate. Here Firouzja is already in a winning position. Look how active his pieces are on the queen, but he found a devastating blow in this position. Knight to d6, check. If you take, then this is a checkmate. So you have to take with the queen and then the rook falls. And you already won the exchange. Then what about this amazing sacrifice out of the blue, in my opinion? Here Firouzja can win a pawn. Well, nothing is really loose, so it seems. But this pawn is loose because you can play bishop to h6. Of course we will check what happens if you take, but if you don't take, king to d7 for example, you simply win the pawn and you attack the bishop. This is a winning position for white. And what if you take the bishop? Then you fork the rook and the king. But here you cannot take the knight, because if you take the knight, your bishop hangs. So this is key. This is what Firouzja saw. So instead, black tries to prevent the knight from escaping with bishop to g5. See, the knight doesn't have any good escape squares now, but with h4 you will. And if you move the bishop to the last square left, you play rook to e2, attacking the bishop has to go away, and then you win this pawn. And your knight escapes sooner or later. So best move here is to take the pawn and then your knight escapes. And this is winning for Firouzja. Here Firouzja penetrated white's camp completely with the queen on this square. White tried to trade the queens and protect the knight. But Firouzja has a great resource. Queen takes knight. And if you take the queen, then this is a checkmate. Here Firouzja is positionally better. With the f5 square completely under control, it will be a great spot for the knight at some point. But there is a forcing win in this position. Rook takes b6. Brilliant move. If you take the rook, and of course you will, then you win this pawn. And you take away the key structure of black's defense. After rook e8, the best move would have been to take on e5. It's not what Firouzja played. Now the knight is pinned and attacked, so you have to defend it. Then you have to slide back your bishop, because now your bishop is attacked, so you have to slide it back. And after queen b8, you play the move d6. And if you take the pawn, then this is a fork. And if you don't, well, these pawns are rolling. This knight gets behind the pawns. This is deadly. Instead, Firouzja took the knight on e7. And see how juicy the f5 square is. Of course, the bishop is being captured. And now you give a check and you win back the rook. Takes. Now Firouzja plays a move d6, trying to get rid of the defender of the knight. And if the king goes back, you cannot take the knight. Probably you wanted to, but then there's a check here. And this is a perpetual, because you cannot escape from the checks. So instead, Firouzja played the move rook to b1, bringing in the rook. Now black took the pawn with a check. You take the queen, and now the rook comes in. In this position, mate in 4, do you see it? With which move will you start? I'm Mr. X. And do you like this video? Make sure to subscribe. Start with the check here, but then the knight comes in. What is the right follow-up? Well, you sacrifice the rook on h7. You have to take the rook, and then you have a check here. If the king goes here, this is a checkmate. If the king goes here, then this is a checkmate. Mate in 4. You saw it, didn't you? In this position, Firouzja looks dead lost. With the bishop, the rook, the queen. But he's not, because there's a forced sequence here for white. Do you see it? Well, maybe you're thinking of moves like this, but there is a forcing move, rook to h5 check. If you take with the queen, then you have a check, and this is a checkmate. And if you take with the pawn, then this is a checkmate. Here, Firouzja plays against none other than Eric Hansen, and he destroys him. In this position, you would love to sacrifice your rook here, but the rook on c5 is doing a great job in protecting the g5 square. And that's what Firouzja saw. And that's why he slided in his rook from d1 to d5, blocking the defense of the g5 square. It doesn't matter that this is a rook, it matters that it can blockade. The game is all about checkmate, and that's what Firouzja is doing. So if you, for example, take with the e-pawn, then you sacrifice the rook. Well, you have to take back. There's a check. Checkmate. What if you take with the bishop? Then you have the same sequence, because the pawn is not protected. So let's see. What if we take with the rook? So, what happens if you take with the rook? Well, then you simply take back the rook, and the defender is gone. And now you have to play king h7. We know what happens if you allow rook takes g5 with a check. Now you can simply take the bishop, and you're a knight up. But instead, Eric played the right move in this position, king to h7 right away, leaving the rook where it is. And now Firouzja sacrifices the rook. If you take back, then you come in with the queen. But now there is a great in-between resource, rook to g8. And Firouzja played the king to h4. But this is a wrong move, because now rook g6 will be winning for black. Because if you move away the knight, then the rook can come in between. Better would have been knight to g7, threatening checkmate here. And now knight to e8 will be winning. And if you take the knight, then this is a checkmate. And this would not be the right move, because this is a checkmate as well. Instead, queen h4, rook to g6, knight to f4 check. Eric played the move king to g8. And this is a wrong move, because now you take the rook, and when you take the knight, this is a check, and the queen is hanging. So you take, and you take, and yeah, of course, you finally take this rook, but this is winning for white. Against Min Lei, a double brilliancy by Firouzja in a row. First, bishop takes on g5. You have to take back with the king. If you would take with the pawn, then the rook comes in, and this is lost for black. This pawn is weak, the bishop is hanging at some point. King is completely out in the open at some point. So Min Lei takes the bishop, and now there's another brilliancy. Rook takes e6, you take it back, check, and when the king goes here, you take the bishop, and this is a checkmate in 2 moves. Look at this game. Firouzja has a beautiful knight, a beautiful bishop. Look at this rook at the open file. This bishop is strong. But you need a queen in the game, and the rook needs to join as well. So what's the best move? Well, king to d7. What? You're attacking and you move the king to d7. Incredible. But it's all to free room for the queen and for the rook, because after the move e5, you give a check. You give up the rook. And when you take the rook, you bring in the queen. Now it can come here, otherwise it would have been blocked by the king on e8. The knight is attacked twice. If you don't do anything, it's a checkmate on h1. So you have to play the knight to g3, and now you slide in the queen to h3, threatening checkmate here. And you cannot do anything about it. And white resigned.